This podcast contains adult language and discussion of mature content. It is not intended for children. Please use your own discretion when listening, and we hope you enjoy.
Antaranakishan Elvin Shemlins Dwarvan Canary alike.
And welcome everyone to the Left of the Fade, the Thedosian podcast where one human, that's me, Rose,
And one elf, that would be me, Thorn, from opposite sides of the Frostback Mountains,
delve the deep roads of the Dragon Age franchise to shine light on some topics that we feel haven't been given enough attention.
So please join us as we journey through the dark and the light.
And walk the road less traveled to the left of the fade.
Oh my god, ladles, jelly spoons, and other assorted kitchenware, have you seen the new trailer? That's it.
We're literally recording this like right after the Game Awards, so we're kind of on this high right now.
Can you tell? Is it obvious? I am absolutely over the moon. I mean, seriously, the very fact that it was narrated by my favourite dwarf in the entirety of Thedas is possibly one of my favourite things. Genuinely. We all know how much Thorn loves her little fuzzy Varric, right? But genuinely, when I heard his voice in that trailer, I was like, just, especially when he said that the whole, I've got your back, we've got your back, I've got your back. I was like, oh my god.
We have confirmation he's gonna be in it.
Is he gonna be, he's gonna be in it, but is he gonna be another companion? And then the possibility that he may be a romance option. Now, I'm not saying that we're gonna do it, but if BioWare were benevolent enough to lay upon us the Dragon Age fandom, the wonder that is Varric Tethras as a romance option, then finally I will actually, I'll stop asking for the game. I'll give them the time to give us it. But somebody tweet me an answer. If Varric Tethras is a romance option, I'll back off. I'll can the beans. But if you're not willing to, give me confirmation of what I need to know, then just give me my fucking game. Just give me my game. It's that simple. It's your choice. Either confirm or deny, or give me my game so I can date myself. Every episode, Rose, I said I was gonna. Every one until we get it.
Although I think you hit the record for saying it the earliest.
Oh yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. With good reason, though. I mean, given the fact of what we're talking about right at this moment. Also, getting to see Solus at the end. Nummy little egg. Num 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 num. I don't care if he's
beautiful.
It does.
I'm so excited for, like, Tevinter looks, what I assume to be Tevinter looks gorgeous, but I'm more excited for what I assume to be Antifa. It looks gorgeous.
Honestly, the concept art is just stunning. That entire, everything that they showed in that is absolutely beautiful. And if that is even a rough idea or a rough representation of what it's going to look like in gameplay, obviously that wasn't a gameplay trailer, but if it looks even
it wasn't
like it did in that trailer in actual gameplay, that is just going to be amazing. What looked like it might have been Tevinter looked absolutely magical to me, and in the best of ways. It looked like a cross between, like, and I think I mentioned this before when we were talking about it, it looked like a cross between, like, a magical elven forest and, like, not quite medieval, but, like, moving
I thought you were talking about Antifa when you said that.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Tevinter. They both look beautiful.
Mm.
And to me, frankly, both a little bit magical. I mean, obviously, one of them is literally a place full of magic peeps. But the other one is, like, they're both as beautiful as each other, just in different ways, obviously. But, I mean, it looked to me like, unless we're talking about different places, unless we're thinking one is one and one is the other.
That's possible. I thought the first
possible.
one that they showed was Antiva, and the second one was Tevinter.
Hmm.
The first one where the character is, like, sitting not quite on the roof, but, like, up high, drinking wine or whatever it is, I thought that was Antiva.
Yeah.
Unless...
Whatever.
I guess
right,
we'll
okay.
know.
BioWare,
we
need some answers.
Out.
We need some answers, people.
They both looked beautiful, which is the whole point.
It was like sort of early, what's the word I'm looking for? I hate it when this happens to my brain. Words just go, nope, I'm yeeting out of here, bye. Early industrial London, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like way back in the 1800s and stuff, crossed with like this magic kingdom. Like that's what it looked like to me, and it was just absolutely stunning in my opinion. It was just beautiful the way it was all built up and sort of shadowy and mystical almost in bits. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure everybody else knows what I mean, even if I'm rambling utter nonsense, which makes no sense to anybody but me, in fact, including me sometimes. But, you know. Honestly, I'm so glad that it looks like Solus is going to be the main bad guy.
You know, my husband actually predicts that Solus is gonna get killed off, or at least stop being the bad guy in some shape or form in like the first part of the game.
Okay. You tell Mr. Rose he's not allowed to say that anymore. Okay.
No,
he's not allowed to say that anymore. Because I mean, even though I know as an elf that we are going to be against Solus in this next game, he doesn't have to die.
No, I said killed or no longer be the bad guy in some shape or form in the first part.
Well, the only way... Okay. If he changes his mind and joins our side, then fine.
He thinks that the actual big bad is someone else. And that Solus is just sort of a fly in the ointment type, so to speak.
It does seem like there might be other... I mean, I noted in here, it seems as if we've got, like, possibly 3 big bads in this next game coming up.
Mm-hmm.
One of which is going to have to do with Darkspawn. So possibly another Blight.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I was getting from it, anyway. I mean, at some point...
A worse Blight. I would almost say a worse Blight.
Yeah. It would have to definitely be a lot worse than in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got this game is going to be like, I would imagine that they're probably, as much as I hate to say it, not going to extend the franchise for much longer.
I think originally it was like 5 Dragon Age games, and I don't see them going against that. Like it's going to be 5. So
you know, like. Because as I said, I couldn't have seen them stretching it out much further anyway. It seems like this is... It's always seemed to me, ever since I played Inquisition, that the next game was either going to be a climax or like the chapter you get just before the climax. But it seems as if... But it almost feels as if this is going to be a sort of J.R.R. Tolkien type ending to the entire story. Like, there'll be happy bits, but there's also going to be a lot of shit as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you know much about the Tolkien universe.
Considering the fact that Lord of the Rings was like my thing when I was 11.
Good.
Beyond Lord of the Rings, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know much outside of Lord of the Rings, but I I actually credit Lord of the Rings for being, like, the thing that got me into, like, nerd culture and stuff.
Well,
because growing up in a Christian conservative family, a lot of that stuff, like Harry Potter and whatnot, was bad, but Lord of the Rings was okay because it was based on the Bible and Tolkien was a Christian, so that was basically my outlet for nerd stuff. So I clung to it.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. Having been a big fan of Lord of the Rings ever since I was a small kid myself. You will remember then, in the books, there's the whole, I think it's the last chapter, it's pretty much it's a bittersweet ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for most people, everything's nice and it's all calm and everything's calm down, but for Frodo, everything is completely shot to shit.
Yep.
And he can't stay there anymore. His life is, he's not the same person he was when he left the Shire, right? So
which is realistic.
Yeah. So he leaves, and the whole ending, everything that happened in the run up to that, it's a very bittersweet thing, and I've got a real feeling that this game series is going to go the same way. That's
definitely possible. And in fact, I would even think it'd be, like, more realistic, because when you think about all of the horrible, horrible stuff that people have to do in order to basically save, basically this world-altering thing, there's a lot of PTSD and, like, other stuff that you go through. Like, you're just not, the same. When you think about, like, people who come back from war or whatever, they are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
Absolutely. I'm just hoping that, because, I personally could draw quite a few parallels between Tolkien's world and Thedas and the various different factions, etc. there, but that would be another deep dive that I'll probably do on my own channel when I'm talking about Dragon Age. But it's because I'm also going to be talking about Lord of the Rings there as well. So my teeth just are misbehaving this week. Nay. I will get my words out eventually. Do you have anything else to say about the trailer?
Not about the trailer. I mean, that's basically it. It was, like, just a short thing, and you can go and watch it. It's like, I want to say, like, a minute long, a minute and a half long, something like that. But yeah, it's very pretty, very exciting.
We'll link to the trailer in the thing.
Yeah. I do want to touch on, considering that we sort of timestamped this by saying that we're recording it after the Game Awards, and considering earlier episodes of our podcast of certain characters we have talked about, I do want to mention, sort of answer it before we get, like, questions, if anyone was wondering. If you have been a part of the Dragon Age fandom and really in, like, the Twitterverse and stuff, you probably know what happened on Dragon Age Day with a certain voice actor that we don't want to talk about. Will we be... Yes, smell us. Will we be addressing that? I personally don't want to, because I think we've already said our piece and we don't like him, and just in general, it like...
As far as I'm concerned, he's no longer part of the community. He needs to stop talking to us because we don't want to talk to him. It really is that simple.
Well, this episode is not about that, but I do think... So in a couple weeks, our next episode is going to come out on January 1st. And we have already previously talked about what we're doing for that episode, and in order to get into... It is going to be a happier episode, just because January 1st we want to start the year out happy, especially with 2020 having been such a shit show.
Fuck yeah.
And other bad things that have happened or sad things, I should say, bad and sad things that have happened in the Dragon Age community in the month of December, including Mr. Smellis. But I mean, ignoring the fact that Grog Smellis was involved at all, there were other much more fabulous people involved in certain unfortunately sad things that happened this month. Yeah. So we will be talking about that briefly in the next episode.
Yes.
Just because it's going to be sort of a lead-in, but it's going to be short. It's not going to be as detailed as our previous episode. If you're coming into this and this is your first episode or whatever, or you haven't listened to the other one, you can go back. It's episode 2, and we talk about this horrific, awful, absolutely atrocious
walking trash fire.
Yeah. You can go and listen to that, understand who we're talking about and why. But we will go in the next episode and talk about kind of what he did or whatever and how he's upset people even more. Didn't know that would be possible, but we did.
Oh yeah, who knew?
And in this case, he in particular targeted the Dragon Age community on Dragon Age Day, which was a really fucking low blow.
That's fucking sacrilege, man.
Yeah.
Don't make me come at you with, like, Roblox
but
moves.
we will cover that, just not this episode.
Yeah.
This episode, we're gonna try to get into some harder stuff. I don't want to say necessarily challenging yet, because we're gonna sort of ease our way into the more difficult stuff.
Yeah, but we're definitely putting some meat on this sandwich. It ain't all about bread, bitch. Like, get into deeper topics.
Oh, that was great.
The random nonsense Thorn throws out in the middle of the conversation just for nowhere. Like.
So we're gonna be talking about religion, specifically religion and Thedas, and the sort of like what's the word that I'm looking for? The parallels.
Yeah.
To like religion and real life. And just so everyone is clear, this is not that we thought that we'd think this anyway, but this isn't like we're just talking about this religion resembles this resembles this. It's not about like, oh, this is better or whatever. It's not.
Yeah, there'll be no religious persecution even in the slightest from us, because we are personally a very diverse. We're a rather diverse group, just the two of us.
Yeah.
So.
We have different religions, so
yeah.
So so this has been one that has personally, we're finally at a point where we're doing a little extra research here.
Yeah. I have to put some actual work in. What, man?
Yeah.
Like, I have to do actual work. Excuse me? This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for conversations about stuff I enjoy. Who said I had to actually work for my work? What? Yes, where shall we begin?
Well, maybe we should start with, I don't know, I would say...
Well, we start with the most obvious and go for, like, the biggest religion in Thedas. The Andrastian Chantry. Yeah, so this is something that, a reminder, I've mentioned it before, but a reminder that, I am a Christian. And, so just in general, I mean, I think everyone could see it just because Christianity is such a dominant religion in so many places, and in a lot of, but it's clear to see that Andrastianism is based on Christianity. Mm-hmm. And so it's like it's very obvious, like there's no doubt about that. I think it's even been said that that Andraste is based on a combination of Joan of Arc and Jesus. Right. And I think that's obvious. Like, you don't need to do much investigating to see that. Even if you have no faith or aren't a Christian or whatever,
I think it's pretty clear about that. You don't need to dive too deep to see that.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify, not that anybody, I'm sure, needs reminded, I'm Norse pagan, and even I knew this. Even I could see it. It was blatantly obvious to me. So...
Well, and there's a lot of stuff that I think are obvious, like,
yeah.
The Exalted March is like the Crusades. If you know anything about history, that's clear,
Yeah.
And, other little things. But there were some things that I only found out by reading The World of Thedas, Volume 1, that I didn't know. So, like, the whole... I guess I'm not really gonna go, because if you're listening to this, we assume that you are a Dragon Age fan and know, like, quite a bit about it. So I'm not gonna go and just, like, sort of reiterate stuff, say stuff that you already know or whatever. But, I just think that, personally for me, and my history with playing video games is fairly new. I'd say at this point probably only about 5 years of, like, sort of regularly playing video games. So maybe I'm wrong, but just the little I've experienced, it seems like all of the religions in Dragon Age seem more realistic than possibly other video game religions, or not just video game, like religions in fantasy stories.
Yeah.
At least to me, it feels
no,
like.
I get where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from. And it does genuinely seem as though, I don't know if it's got something to do with the amount of research put in beforehand, or whether, the amount of work that was put into the creation of these religions or whatever, but they do seem a lot more fleshed out than a lot of fantasy settings tend to. They're not, to my personal experience, they're not as fleshed out as, say, since we're talking about a fantasy setting, Thorn gets to bring up one of her favourite fandoms again. Yay, Game of Thrones. I wouldn't say they were maybe as in-depth as some of the religions in Game of Thrones, but I would say they were definitely up there on a par with them. Like, if not as well thought out, almost,
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, in the same note as with Dragon Age, you've got, like, well, in Game of Thrones, you've got a couple of polytheistic religions. And then you've got the monotheistic religion towards, well, there are two, So, but also the religious diversity seems to be up there in Dragon Age, whereas in other games it's not so much. It seems like in a lot of other games that people tend to sort of all be the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that
I'd agree with that.
Understood.
Well, I think just sort of the sort of taking inspiration from real life religions sort of helps make it, just feel realistic, and helps to sort of create that diversity between the religions too. And it just I think that's really helpful in just making this world feel real. And I think it's definitely a great thing that they have made, like, no religion better than the other. Like, there are definitely some points of every single one that you could look at and be like, that seems a little problematic, and I don't know if I agree with that, and they just don't seem to, hold any on a pedestal. Now, you can make an argument that they kind of do with something like Andrastianism, just because it's so prevalent, and it's so much more, but that's sort of like I don't see that as, them, like holding one above the other.
No.
It is drawing inspiration from history and real life history.
Reality. Yeah.
And how much Christianity has had a hold on so much in our history.
And an influence.
Yeah.
As well, because the parallels between the influence that Andrastian faith and the Christian faith have had on their respective worlds is phenomenal. With, like you said, the exalted marches are pretty much an in-game universe replication of the Crusades.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, they had a huge impact on the world surrounding them. Yep. And the sort of politics, shall we say, because unfortunately, the two, while we might want to keep them separated, tend to be intertwined, of certain regions, was influenced by certain things that happened. It's pretty much parroting real life.
Yep.
Across all aspects, personally, I think. That's one of the things I love about this game series. That while it's fantasy, and it's obviously fantasy, because you've got these creatures that don't exist in real life, like Kunari and elves, and dwarves. You've also got the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's relatable because you can tie things from that fantasy world to your own real life.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons why I love Dragon Age so much.
And I think that's why, one of the many reasons why it hits us on a personal level, is because it does feel personal.
Yeah.
Because parts of it, while it is fantasy, it still feels realistic.
And I think it's testament to how well the universe is written as well, because obviously it's not just in-game stuff. There's out-of-game lore and stuff like that you can pick up on and learn and read about and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the things that really ties it well. It marries the two. Like, you don't just have the game; you also have all of these other experiences that you can read about and learn about and stuff like that are out with. Like in the books, both the World of Thedas volumes and like the graphic novels and comics and stuff like that. There's so much more to be learned and to be gleaned from this than just, what's staring you in the face in the games.
And I would say, like I'm gonna be upfront here. I haven't read all the codexes. And there's still quite a bit, like, I haven't finished, I read through all of, like, the World of Thedas Volume 1. I haven't read through all of Volume 2 yet. So there's still, I know there's still quite a bit that I don't know. And even in this own episode, I don't think we're going to talk about everything, just because the lore of this world is so rich. But, like, even when you go through, you can probably hear pages flipping here. I have
I'm actually sitting here thinking, like, give me a page reference, because I've got my World of Thedas.
I know.
Volume 1, that right here.
I'm trying. There are even things that are only in like the codexes or the World of Thedas that you do not get in the game that are referenced. Even the tiny things, like, okay, so this. I mean,
I'm a whore for lore when it comes to this. That's why I've started buying all of this stuff in the first place. But when it came to the codex cards in game, I would sit and read them. I would suck that information up like a sponge. Like,
you lore whore.
I am, and you love me for it.
No, it's great. You're a great, like, counter to me, because I know that there's not as much lore as I would like to know, just because I don't sit there and read the codexes. Like on page 12, there's and they mention this, like, the whole thing about, like, they wanted to. Sin corrupted the Magisters who entered the Fade. Like, they tried to, like, get into the Fade, and sin corrupted them, and that's where, like, the first Darkspawn began. And I kind of, now it's very, very loose, obviously, because a different outcome happened. It seems kind of similar to the Tower of Babel. I don't know how well you know that story.
Nowhere near as well as you. Let me put it that way. The likelihood of me being able to actually, bring enough details to the fore to be able to give the comparisons between the two is slim to there's no fucking chance, you tell her.
Well, the Tower of Babel is a story in Genesis that is, I would say, in Christian circles, tends to sort of explain why people speak different languages. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Is that where they got the name for the app? Sorry, I know that was a completely random thought that came out of nowhere, but there is a Babel app.
I know. I don't know how true this is, but supposedly the term babble, like the word babble, like when you're speaking nonsense or whatever, comes from the story of the Tower of Babel, which in turn may have something to do with the app. I don't know how true that is, if I'm being honest. But
you learn something random, useless every day.
It is basically like I need to make sure that I'm correct here. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So it says, and they said to one another, "Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they began to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, and they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from hence did the Lord scatter them abroad the face of all the earth. So it's basically, they tried to get into heaven, so they built a tower to get into heaven. And this is one of those things where it's like, is this metaphorical or is this literal? To be honest, I don't know. This is I have some things in the Bible that I personally believe are literal, and some things that I think are metaphorical, but I think they have a great message from them.
Yeah, I'm similar to that, obviously. While I'm not a Christian and I don't believe in a Christian God, I do believe that some of the stories from the Bible may have literally happened.
Yeah. Well, I think there's even
a lot of them I think are hyperbole.
Well, I think there's even like
there are historical references for some.
Yeah,
Like there's actual historical record of certain things.
I believe something like the Great Flood, if you look across like all like of the oldest religions, seem to have some sort of Great Flood. And I think history even supports that there was some kind of Great Flood. Now, the result of that is, I would think it is different across many different religions. Some are very similar, some are a little different, But I definitely agree with you that there are some things that history does say, okay, yeah, this did happen. How it came about changes from religion to religion. But
and if you were to take in science into that equation, it would change completely again.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can be argued that science is a religion in and of itself these days.
Yeah, that's true. So it just reminded me of that. Now, the outcome, of course, is different. I was immediately going to say this is fictional, even though that feels wrong, because it's like, to some people, Christianity is fictional, and that's totally fine that you have that belief. That's okay. But I just mean, like, they wrote it. they wrote the whole thing with the Tevinter Magisters and trying to get into the Golden City, and it blackened. This is more of the Tower of Babel is more of we're gonna make it so you guys can't understand each other because you tried to do this. I would say the consequences for the Golden City blackening and the first Darkspawn is much more severe.
Yeah,
because
so, yeah.
I think it's great that we have different languages.
You know me, I'm a language nut.
Yeah, so I would say the consequences are much more severe. Like, they took something that seemed similar and they turned, and they made it, they fantasized it. They sort of made it all fantasy and gave it greater consequences. But I just found that interesting, and the whole, this isn't particularly religion of sorts, but within this sort of same thing when it's talking about the history of Andraste and all that, and it has to do with the Exalted March. Yeah, the on page 13, the Orlesians uprooted elven settlements and forced the elves into human settlements of a nomadic life. There's definitely huge parallels to our own history and the way that people would, basically would try to erase other people's religion, other people's culture, and try to make them convert to, like Christianity. Christianity
was a great one for that. I mean, my ancestors know very well exactly how that went down. Essentially, converter will crucify you back then.
It's like colonialism and Christianity go hand in hand in history.
Yeah.
So that's
true.
Definitely, while not specifically related to the Bible, I felt that it was important to mention that, because, yeah. I have to go entirely to the religion section now, because there's more in there.
See, I found that and bookmarked it while we were discussing.
Yeah. And so yeah, here we go.
See, there are many points in this that I very vehemently disagree with.
What points?
Let's start with the first point, that the first of the 4 core principles.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I disagree with that completely. Vehemently and wholeheartedly. Magic is not a corrupting influence on the world. People are a corrupting influence on magic. It's the complete opposite way around, and that is somewhere where I vehemently disagree with the Chantry. But then, you know me, I'm not exactly pro-Chantry, so...
Oh! I'm not pro-Chantry either. And I'd say that out of anyone, I identify more with Andrastianism. I'm not pro-Chantry. Just like in real life, I am a Christian, but I'm not... I don't want to say I'm not pro-church, because
No, but you're just not a huge churchy person.
I believe in having a community and a place to go and all that. I just think as an organization, I'm against church as an organization.
Yeah.
I do go to church, obviously not right now, because beer blight, but, I do enjoy being in a commundy, of shared interests, someone that you can talk to and be like, what does this mean? Anyway, I'm getting away from that, but, so, yeah,
it's literally the first of the core principles. And I find that very insulting. I mean, I'm not a spell slinger, but, I mean, if I was, I would find it very insulting. Because I don't see how something that you're born with, something that is not innately within your control to receive, is somehow a corrupting influence both on you and the world around you. I don't see how that's possible. It would be like saying that autism is a corrupting influence on the world. And I'm sorry, I was born with autism, but I never corrupted anybody. I've never gone out of my way to hurt or harm anyone. So I would say, and there's a reason why I say conflate the two, by the way. There's a reason why I conflate the two. Mainly because there's the sort of, there's been a trend that I've noticed recently of specifically those who are what I would refer to as militant Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Desperate to cure everything and anything that they see as a defect. Mm-hmm. And I've seen quite a lot of them. I've spotted quite a few who are anti-vaxxers for that very reason. And who believe that people like me need to be cured of our autism. Obviously, they're talking more specifically about those who are in a worse off position than me, those who are non-verbal and whose executive function is, I mean, mine ain't great, but theirs is worse. You know what I mean? But at the same time,
I want to put it. I don't think it's I don't think it's a good idea to say it's worse. It presents in a different way that has different challenges.
Aye, I wasn't saying that it was worse. What I'm saying is that they're in a different position from me where they have different struggles that I have.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if I'm completely honest with you, I have next to zero executive functioning capabilities whatsoever. Most of the things that I do in my life, I have to be reminded by other people to do. So, you know. Okay. So, my point is, there are a lot of people who seem to feel the need to cure that, but what they don't understand is that with that is a large chunk of my personality. And I don't know about other people, but I know that I wouldn't have the same interests that I have now. Or, you know, special interests, I call them. What most people would call obsessions. Like, I don't think I would have the same vehemence of love for Dragon Age if I wasn't autistic. I don't think I would have the same vehemence of love for Doctor Who if I wasn't autistic. Or for music. And it's not that I don't think I would be interested in these things. I do. But I don't think I would be interested in them to the same extent. Like, I obsessively read as much as I can about as many of my fandoms as I possibly can. While also trying to fit in all the other shit. It's no wonder my brain never stops. Like, it's always getting filled with new information. But that's because I have this hunger for new information constantly. And I genuinely don't think that I would have been the same had I been born neurotypical. And that's not me in any way, shape or form slighting neurotypical people. Y'all are awesome. Right? Neurotypical people, I give you a big thumbs up, a salute, and all of the other pleasant gestures with hands and stuff. But our differences are obvious, and it is not outwardly obvious. Like, outwardly you can't tell the difference between a non-mage and a mage, right?
Yeah.
With the possible exception of their armour, and if they're carrying a staff, you know, but...
Which they never comment on. How do we know that they're a mage? Well, maybe it's the giant staff on their back.
See that big old stick with the big fiery glowing crystal at the end? That could maybe be it. Yeah, that's never something that's added in. But, so, essentially what I'm saying is it's the same kind of thing. Like, people in Thedas seem to think that magic isn't a good thing and that it needs to probably go away, and if it can't go away, we'll have control over it, right? Mm-hmm. They're trying to do the same thing with these hidden disabilities. Like
what it should say, because I think anything that is good can also be bad if it's abused. Mm-hmm. So I think what it should say is magic shouldn't be abused.
Yes.
Because then it could be a corrupting influence.
Yes. But although I would still be inclined to disagree with the last part of that sentence because it is an inane power in and of itself, and you wouldn't say that, like, I don't think, personally, that you could say the likes of oil is a corrupting influence. Okay. It's an inanimate object. It has no thoughts or feelings and can't influence you personally one way or the other.
Okay. I suppose that, yeah, you're right. Because then it's like, you make the choice if you want to be corrupted or not. Okay,
exactly.
I can see
At
your
the
point.
end of the day, it's the human element, and that is where I will vehemently disagree with the Chantry. Because the human element that comes is where it comes in that's the issue. Well, I say human, but in Thedas, human, elven, Kunari, everybody but a dwarf. You got something you wanted to interject with?
No, I was...
Thorn goes on a rant. Episode 27.
I'm just...
At least this isn't one of my pervy rants, I suppose. I'd have issues if I was perving over the Maker, though. We'll leave that to when we get to the elven gods. Bit of souls, anyone?
Well, when you were talking about perving over the Maker, it actually brings me to another point where my question is, if lust and coveting is a sin, in the, I would say, in the world of Dragon Age is, okay, quick question. What do they say about lust? Did they say desire? That's what it is. It's been like stuff like greed and lust have sort of been pushed together into desire. So desire, once again, if abused in the eyes of the Chantry, is considered a sin if you're, doing it too much. I'm just saying in the eyes of the Chantry.
I have a question regarding that, though. Like, I have a big something that is, and it's literally just ping, popped into my head right now. Does that not mean, then, that the Maker himself broke some of his own rules?
That's exactly where I was going with that. That's exactly where I was going with that.
She was a married woman, don't you know, Mr. Maker? Not being funny. But she wasn't yours to covet or desire.
So he basically saw how devoted she was. It says, the Maker emerged, according to the Chant of Light, the Maker emerged from his retreat after falling in love with Andraste and the beautiful song she sang for him. It literally reminds me of, like, a Disney movie where, like, the prince sort of hears the princess, like, singing, and it's like, oh, I must find out who she is. Like, that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, it's like Snow White or Beauty and the Beast or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or what was the one? Cinderella.
And it was like the Maker came to Andraste and offered to take her away from the flawed mortal world as his divine bride. So he was like, hey, this world is horrible. Come be with me and you'll be in paradise. Like, I'll show you what paradise is. And even though she was, like, married and she didn't want to... Now, we don't know anything about if Mafarath. His name is so hard to say. I struggle to say it so much.
I always say it Mafarath.
Mafarath? Mafarath. So we don't know anything about, like, if he was actually a good husband or not, or if there doesn't seem to be much. If anyone out there has more info, I didn't find any in this one. Maybe in the World of Thedas 2 there's something, but I don't see anything that says if he was a good husband or not or whatever.
That's next on my purchase list.
It's
what I will say. What about that though? About you saying that there's nothing that says that he was necessarily a good husband or a bad husband. What I will say is the very next line says that she was reluctant to leave her life and her new husband. So that would imply at least somewhat to me that he wasn't a bad husband, because if he was a bad husband, she'd have been like, "Yeet me out here right now."
Or was she reluctant because it was stability? I don't know. Like, that's not the point. The point is that she was reluctant. She didn't want to leave him and go to someone else. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, she wanted to stay with him. And so she sort of compromised. She was like, just, create a new place for us to be, and the Maker agreed to this only if Andraste convinced his people to destroy their false idols. So he's bargaining with her and is trying to, be like, oh, I'll do this with you if, like... The Maker's just a dick.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Like, I've sort of read through this gently, over time. And I never really realised just how much of a sort of... He's that boss at work, right? That sort of gives you the eye every morning when you come in, and after 6 months decides to grab your arse and offers you a promotion if you didn't tell anybody. I mean, that's who the maker is, and I'm not liking it very much.
I know!
I am not liking that very much. I'm so glad that...
disgusting.
I am so glad that I'll stick
I
with
feel
my
like
Elven gods.
He's kind of guilty of sinning himself.
Yeah.
It's
like, maybe you blackened your own holes,
or
buddy.
maybe
I'm
it's
not
like,
being funny.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, is the whole thing, like, how much of the Maker is true, and how much does the Maker even exist? Like, how much of this is it, you know?
Well, I think we got some sort of confirmation that at least the halls existed.
I think there is.
In Inquisition.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Corypheus would have had anything to say at all if he'd turned up there and been like, there's nothing here.
It might be like, my personal belief is that there are things in the Bible that word for word are true. And then there are things that are metaphors for other things. And that history, as it's explained in the Bible, is actually different than what the Bible says through a combination of mistranslation or misinterpretation. And I wonder if that's what is going on here, is that, or maybe just in general, the Chantry change stuff on purpose.
It's possible.
So it's hard to know, you know.
I mean, I fully believe that the church changed things on purpose in the Bible to suit their own requirements.
I think it's kind of funny.
I don't think it was necessarily a modern thing, by the way. I think this is something that they did quite a while back.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
I fully believe that the Christian church did exactly the same thing.
Oh, I 100% agree with you on that. 100%.
See, and this is why you're one of the few Christians I actually get on with.
And in fact, even as early as the word homosexual did not appear in the Bible until 1946, by the way.
Yeah,
even as late as that.
I've had fully blown arguments about what Sodom and Gomorrah was actually about.
Yep.
Like, fully fledged arguments. It wasn't about homosexuality. It was about the P word we can't mention on YouTube.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yep. So I find it interesting that the Chantry still teaches this history with the Maker, like, sort of taking her away and stuff, when he's clearly made out to be a giant asshole.
Oh, like, yeah.
If they're going to sit there and praise the Maker and all that, if they're supposed to give their love to the Maker, then why wouldn't they change the story? Yep. I'm almost too inclined to believe that this is real because it's in here, and why would they not? Like, I don't get it. It's... oh, boy. And then, like, okay. We were talking about... Oh, yeah, that's another thing that I did not know until I read this, but it's talking about how, prevailing wisdom says Andraste came into this world in the small village of Denerim, now a bustling capital. That reminds me of, like, you know, Jesus coming into the world in a village in the most humble of ways. So it's like, born humble like Jesus. So that's where a lot of the, you know, one of the many, many sort of allusions to Jesus that's there.
Yeah.
You know,
that and the healing powers of Arashis and stuff.
Yeah, healing powers. Then the leading an army and burning at the stake is very Joan of Arc. You know, hearing the voice of the Maker. Yeah, so it's definitely a sort of cross there.
Yeah. Well, there are many cross references. I mean, I think this is actually going to be the easiest Thedosian religion for us to cover.
It's the most obvious for sure.
Yeah, which is probably why it was best to start with this one.
And then, like, the whole thing about, you know, we were talking about how we don't know if he was a good husband or not. Mafarath, you know, betraying Andraste. can safely say was pretty bad. But
also, to a certain extent, understandable. I mean,
yeah.
the man was probably being ridden hard by the green-eyed monster, because this deity, this he of all this power, had decided to pluck his brand new wife from his side and send her off on this fucking quest across Thedas to, like, essentially remind the world that they all belonged to him. What a dick! I'm sorry, but the more I talk about the Maker, the more I dislike him.
Well, not to mention that, I mean, he fought on behalf of the Maker. Like, he was devoted to the Maker. That's kind of like your best friend taking your wife.
It's your best friend taking your wife. Yeah, it is. In fact, I would say it's almost exactly the same.
So,
except your best friend happens to be a god.
I understand his anger. Like, I get it.
I feel bad for Matharath. Like, I genuinely feel bad for the guy, because, like, you love this woman, you're married to her, you've said that you're going to spend the rest of your life with her, and then God comes and goes, nope, motherfucker, she's mine. Fuck you. Essentially giving you the bird while going, oh, by the way, do this for me.
Although, I mean, on the other side of that, if he truly did love her, maybe he shouldn't have sort of led the journey that found her burning at the stake. But I understand his anger. Like, I get it. Like, holy crap. But yeah. Yeah. He's a real jerk. Oh, but then, Hessarian, the Archon of the Imperium, at the end, like, he was all for Andraste getting captured, but then it says, it is written that Hessarian took pity on Andraste in her last moments, tied to that burning stake, and put an end to her suffering with one thrust of his sword. Later, the Archon claimed that the voice of the Maker ordered him to do it. I mean, maybe the Maker ordered him to do it because he didn't like to see her suffer, but
maybe the Maker ordered him to do it to get her there to have his side quicker, because he was done dealing with this shit and just wanted her by his side like he'd always wanted in the first place.
But, I mean, it does seem Hessarian was very, like, at the end, he was finally like, oh, this is wrong. You know, I shouldn't do this, you know. And that, to me, had echoes of the Thief on the Cross.
Mm.
I'm not sure if you know about the Thief on the Cross.
I was brought up Christian.
Okay. I don't know, like, how much, you know, like, when you became Norse or whatever.
I know a bit about, okay. I know quite a bit about the Bible, because I did go to Sunday school when I was, like...
Okay. I wasn't sure, so...
But me and, like, most of my family became Norse pagan gradually throughout the years. So.
Okay. Well, for those who don't know...
Yes.
That are listening, the Bible tells us the story of the thief on the cross, who was, like... when you think of the image of the three crosses, you know, Jesus in the middle, and there are other two on the other side, the Bible teaches that the people on the other crosses alongside Jesus were actual criminals. Like, they actually did crap. Now, were those crimes big? Were they, was the punishment of being crucified valid?
Yeah, were they crucifixion worthy? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't think we know what the other guy did, but the one was a thief. I don't think there's really any crime out there that is justified by crucifixion at all. It's torture is what it is. So I would say no matter what the other guy did, it doesn't matter. Whatever he did was not justified by crucifixion. But this was, you know, in this time, capital punishment. They liked it.
Again, this is somewhere where you and I would diverge, because while I am mostly against death sentences and stuff, there are definitely some crimes in which I believe that, yeah, even punishments like in my own ancestral background would be something that I would employ.
The thief on the cross was just, you know, he was very, like, he saw what they were doing, and he knew that Jesus didn't belong there. And he was like, this man did nothing wrong. Why are you crucifying him and stuff? And he told Jesus, I believe you truly are the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, on this day you will be with me in paradise. And it's a story that the church likes to use to say it is never too late, you know, even in your last moments, you know. I like to use that. And it seems to, like, echo this here. Like, even at the very end, Hysarion was like, you know, oh, even when it was too late, and people sort of connected him with helping to get Andraste to burn to death. It was like, oh, okay, you know what? I accept you as the actual maker, and I'm sorry for this, and I will help end her suffering. And I know that in some ways, people may be like, well, that sounds a little bit more like Judas, too. And I would say you're right. But I also think that Mafarath is more like Judas, because it says on page 113 in the World of Thedas, says, what became of Mafarath is a mystery, but his name is now synonymous with betrayal, which I think Judas has become synonymous with betrayal.
Absolutely.
So
I'd be inclined to very vehemently agree with you on that. That's definitely... in fact, I do believe it's a well-known phrase when you actually turn to someone and tell them you're a Judas.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, it's actually something widely used to describe somebody who's betrayed you. So yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, what's your next on this? We can start on the chant, if you like. We can start talking about the chant and how...
Yeah, I was rereading a note in here. Like, I have other notes besides just these religion notes, and I have a note in here that's like, why was it a surprise that Fenris can't read them? Because it says, because many Thedosians are illiterate. There's that word again. Copy outside chantries are uncommon and usually owned only by the very rich. So if most of them are illiterate, why was it a surprise that he couldn't read? I don't get it. But aside from that, I mean, the Chant of Light is basically their Bible. That's super obvious. You know, but also it says there are also dissonant verses removed from the wider text because they reference controversial topics such as Andraste's elven disciple Shartan. Now, we know about Shartan. It was mentioned in Dragon Age 2, I would say at length. You know, it's the story of it becomes the book that Fenris learns to read. But it also makes me wonder, what other verses are out there that we don't know about, and what do they talk about? And I'm really, really curious to know more about them.
Yeah. Although at this point I will point out that there are also, it's widely known that, I mean, this is yet another comparison to be made between Christianity and Andrastianism. There are quite a few biblical texts that have been sort of yeeted into the dark depths somewhere, so no one can read them for the same reason.
Yeah.
Because they contain information that nobody... I mean, there's supposed to be an entire chapter about I want to say Mary.
You mean Mary Magdalene?
That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
meant to be an entire chapter about her.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. There's a couple other ones that are written by women, too, that weren't included.
And those have been yeeted into the deepest, darkest depths for the longest time, because women can't have a hand in the Bible. What? No. And quite clearly, elves can't have a hand in the Maker's story. What? No.
Well, I mean, once again, that's something that I think a lot of conservative Christians will try to refute and say, oh no, there are women in the Bible, because they talk about, because Ruth and Esther have books. Yeah, but it's like, there are 2 books versus 64 other books that were written by men, which is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, you are absolutely right. It's the same thing, where, the Bible has books that have been removed from it, and the Chant of Light has verses that have been removed from it. The parallels between Androstianism and Christianity are so heavy.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, I just have a couple more notes here. There's also, they talk about I called it the Eternity Candle, but apparently it has different names. The Sanctuary Lamp, the Chancel Lamp, the Altar Lamp, the Everlasting Light, or Eternal Flame. And it says, each temple maintains a brazier lit with an eternal flame in her memory, including the famed holy brazier at the Grand Cathedral. It is considered a bad omen for a chantry brazier to go out. Chantry members may also ritually burn themselves, passing their hand over a flame or burning a paper which their sins are written. And I mean, that's also something that Christianity and also Judaism have, where they have a flame, a little candle or something, that is near the altar, and it's supposed to symbolize God's eternal presence and never go out. It's actually the light, where the story of Hanukkah comes from, where, it was supposed to go out. They had to wait for more oil to come, and it, burned for 8 days instead of 1 day when it was, and that's where Hanukkah comes from, from the eternal light. But we had one in our church growing up, and so when I read that, I immediately, flashed back to when we had classes, because I had confirmation classes for 2 years. I hated them. Where we had an entire class that was dedicated to the sanctuary lamp, or the candle, and it just reminded me of that,
Sorry, I've just, for some reason, this has just popped back into my head, although it was such a big part of my teenage years. Something, I've just remembered why I remember so much about religion from when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And here's another Thorn powerful moment, and I do apologise in advance. We had a religious education teacher at my high school she was fucking stunning. Seriously, all the boys in my year, and most of the years, half the reason why they took RE was to see this teacher.
Oh my gosh.
She was that gorgeous. She was, dressed in 50s style clothing, but the tight stuff, the wiggle dresses and stuff, with the proper makeup. She was stunning, and that genuinely one of the very first ever girl crushes, one of the very first women I ever had any feelings for in my entire life was this teacher. Not that she ever found out, obviously, because you didn't tell teachers things like that. But yes. Kitty
so
Corbin, you changed my life.
Very close attention in that class, is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. No, I paid very close attention in class. You can believe I did. She was beautiful. Anyway, yes. So, yeah, there you go. You were my first girl crush.
But, yeah, and then I just have one last note here, where the, all of the revered mothers, the priests, they're all female. Always female. And, even in Origins, when you go to Haven and there's a cult, you're like, what? There's a male priest? That doesn't happen. Why is that? It says on page 118 that gender roles are clearly defined in the Chantry, which sees women as the purer sex. Only women can be priests, only a woman can be divine. Men are all judged by Matharoth's betrayal, and the Chantry does not permit them to rise to any senior spiritual role. They may be brothers at most, expected to study and serve, but never lead. The exception to this is the Templar Order, where most members, including those in positions of authority, are male. And that reminds me of the opposite, where the church has a history of not liking females to be in positions of leadership. And it going back to history, you know, some will say, oh, women are too emotional for this position, which is bullshit. Men are emotional too.
Yeah, this is true. It also strikes me as a gigantic hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah, it's straight up sexist. But I put the note here where it's like kind of how like the fall seems to make some Christians believe that men need to leave because women will be so bought in by their emotions and like be easy to deceive or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like, and it just reminded me of another parallel. So
yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that. It's all this gendered hypocrisy everywhere. It doesn't, and I'm talking both in real life and in Dragon Age, because it exists there as well. That's something that we'll talk about at another time in more depth, but it's something, it just really bugs me. But I've always been like that. I grew up with 4 brothers.
Yeah.
Who were all treated differently than me because I was brought up as a girl. So things have been very different for me than my brothers for that very reason, and it's something that has always bugged me when I was growing up. Always. Like the eldest of my younger brothers would get to do things that I wasn't allowed to do.
Yeah, I was the same. I had stuff that I wasn't allowed.
This will be the part where we begin talking about the elven religion, the pantheon, the hierarchy, etc. And personally, I see a lot of comparisons, and Rose and I have spoken about this at length, between both my own belief system as a Norse pagan and the belief systems, particularly for me, of the Celts, because, well, not only because of its heavy leanings on it being a polytheistic religion, but also because of the sort of heavy interactions with nature, specifically. The Romans and the Greeks had all of that as well, obviously. But they didn't seem to, certainly in what I've learned about them, didn't seem to lean quite so heavily on the nature aspect, whereas some of the biggest gods in the Celtic and Norse pantheons are to do with things to do with nature. I won't be trying to make comparisons personally between any of the actual gods, with the exception of one. There's one god in the elven pantheon that I will be drawing comparisons between him and one of my own gods. In fact, my own patron god, which will probably explain my
I think I know where you're going.
Yeah,
with this.
I think you're pretty positive about who I'm talking about. In fact, I'll probably start off with that. The Dreadwolf and his quite obvious, glaring to me comparison to Loki of the Norse pantheon, and neither, not quite on the good side or the bad side, sort of skating that very thin line down the middle. Lover of chaos, doesn't really think that everything has to be a set sort of way, but if it's going to be the way he thinks it should be. I do believe there is a reason why I have a lot of love for Solus the Dreadwolf and for that entire part of the Elven pantheon, because I am someone who follows Loki in my own belief system. There are definitely a lot of similarities, both in the way that they're seen by the rest of the pantheon and by the way they see themselves. Because they don't necessarily see themselves as, like, a bad guy. They've done some bad stuff, but that doesn't necessarily make them a bad guy, whereas most of the rest of the pantheon are like, I don't like you. You're not a good person. And I think that, also their intelligence. The god Loki is a staggeringly, screamingly intelligent god. Seriously. Just to go into one story in particular, which is actually one of my favourite stories. One of Odin's sons, Balder, considered the most beautiful of all the gods, was despised by Loki for one of these very reasons. And he was favoured by the rest of the pantheon for that reason, because he was so beautiful. In fact, it was deemed by another of the pantheon that nothing, in fact I do believe it was Odin, so my brain's failing me this evening, so apologies to all of my fellow Norse pagans out there that I'm slipping over this story right now, but I'll get there. Odin had said that nothing could harm Balder. In fact, all the things of the world had sworn that they wouldn't harm Balder. The stones wouldn't harm him, the waves wouldn't harm him, nothing, no animal or mineral or vegetable would harm Balder. In fact, the only thing which hadn't been made to swear was mistletoe, the mistletoe berry. And using this information, Loki managed to poison Balder using mistletoe, which I think, while evil, quite a bad thing to do, yes, I'm not going to lie, was ingenious. Because he was able to find and use the one weakness that Balder had and exploit it. And I think there are a lot of parallels to be drawn just between that one story and the way the Dreadwolf behaves. Both in the stories that they seem to pass along to one another and the stories that we see, the stuff we hear from him himself. In, like, even just small game references and stuff like that. Things that he said or things that we hear from other people in the game. He's clearly quite an intelligent character. You can get that just from speaking to him. Solus I'm talking about right now. Mm-hmm. So the intelligence is obvious. And I think you'll agree with me about the rest of the pantheon being like, I'm not sure about you. I'm not sure I like you.
Yeah, no, I agree about that. Fen'Harel seems to be the one that they're like, we don't want to associate with them. You can stay over there.
Yeah, you just leave us alone. And like I said, it was the same thing with Loki. What I will say is there is a small difference. In Norse mythology, this could have come from another pantheon, though. This could be something that was sort of sourced from another pantheon, like the Celts or the Romans. According to Dalish lore, this is on page 118 again of the World of Thedas, Volume 1.
Okay.
According to Dalish lore, the world was created by Mithal, goddess of motherhood, justice, and protection, and Elgarran, god of fatherhood and vengeance. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, while the heads of the Norse pantheon are Odin and Frigg, not Freya, as everybody actually thinks. That's not the case, it's Frigg. While the heads of the Norse pantheon are Odin and Frigg, or Frigga, they didn't create the world. Before there was soil or earth, there was only the gaping abyss, which I'm going to try and pronounce this. It's a very difficult word, and I'm not quite there yet with all of my pronunciations, but it's like Gunningagat. It was essentially silent, dark, and lay between the homeland of elemental fire, Muspelheim, and the homeland of elemental ice, Niflheim, which has been pinched and used by animes the world over. The frost from Niflheim and the billowing flames from Muspelheim crept towards each other until they met. And amid the chaos that formed there, came into being a giant by the name of Ymir. He was the first of the godlike giants. He was a hermaphrodite and could reproduce asexually. When he died, his body became what we know now, according to Norse mythology, as, well, I say mythology, the sagas and Eddas. His body became the earth, his bones, the trees, his skull cap is the sky, his blood became the oceans and rivers. So that is how the earth came to be, according to Norse beliefs. However, like I said, that could have come from another pantheon. Mm-hmm. I'm not as well versed, unfortunately, in the other pantheons as I am in Norse stuff, and even right now, I'm coming across like I know absolutely nothing. So, definitely not the case. I promise. I'm embarrassing myself massively right now. That's because I've sort of taken the lead on this one because it most closely resembles my own religion.
Well, that and you've studied elven lore more than I have.
That is also true. But then again, like that, it's because of my strong draw towards elven characters, especially in Dragon Age. And I think that might have something to do with this, actually, the close resemblance between the makeup of our religions, mm-hmm. including to a certain extent how the Dalish are sort of transient as opposed to stationary, because that, while not necessarily being, same as for the Dalish, intrinsically tied to their religion, it is something which their religion sort of, it doesn't necessarily encourage, but it's become part of the travelling's become part of their culture, and it's been integrated with their religion at the same time. So I think that would explain a lot of why I am so elfy, especially when it comes to the games. What I will say is that there is another comparison, that there are very few, right, again on page 118, just at the beginning of when it starts talking about Elven, it says, Elven religion, it says, so complete was the Elven fall that no artifacts of their culture survived from before the arrival of humans. The eldest of the Dalish have assembled a patchwork of what might have been, and believe the lost glory of their people was unparalleled. I wouldn't quite say we believe that, right?
Yeah.
Like, those of us who believe, carry Norse beliefs, we're realists. We're aware that Vikings weren't the best of people, but, you know, and those who followed this pantheon before weren't, they're just human at the end of the day, right? But mm-hmm. It's more the fact that there's very little that can be gleaned from that time based on artifacts, because there are, so as we've found to this day, while there seem to be a lot in comparison with a lot of other belief systems and pantheons and stuff like that. There's a lot more, like, for example, there's a lot more Roman, a lot more Greek, a good deal more Celtic stuff that you would find. Even out with where you would consider usually their territory, shall we say. Like, you'll find a lot more Roman stuff outside Italy than you would probably find in it. You'd probably find a good bit of Celtic stuff in various different parts of the UK. Maybe not necessarily as far-flung as, like, the rest of Europe or even the Americas. Viking stuff, Norse stuff can be, while few and far between, can be found far-flung all over the world. And the same goes with Roman and Greek, but specifically Roman. But again, when it comes to the sheer amounts, the Norse are sort of on the thin end. There's not an awful lot that can be gleaned from back then based on stuff like that. We've definitely got a bigger picture now, and perhaps in following Dragon Age games we'll get a bigger idea of what the world was really like back before the first humans came and the elves were on their own, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because while we've had a peek, we haven't had a good look yet, Yeah. Ah, yes. The Pantheon. What I will say is that this, there's quite a lot of, there seems to be quite a lot of, like, twin stuff. We'll start with the twin brothers, because Alden had two brothers, half-giants, but Alden and his brothers, Vili and Vey.
I will say that from my point of view, at least, the elven religion in general just seems to represent, like, it seems parallel to really most polytheistic religions in history that were then either stamped out or lessened because of colonization and Christianity, like, trying to convert the world, essentially. And then they oppressed groups because they didn't believe what they believed when they refused or whatever. And that's in general what it seems to demonstrate for me, is it seems like it's any group like that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of stuff online or that has sort of shown parallels between, like, like you said, it Greek or Roman has been mentioned, Norse. I even see parallels with Jewish people and the whole thing about their land being taken from them. It seems to be a huge parallel to the way Native Americans were treated. So
yeah, no, I understand that. I can understand that.
They just seem to be a stand-in for any old ancient religion that had everything stripped of them.
When we're talking about the elven pantheon in the book, it moves into talking about their eldest children, Falundin and Dirthamin. That there's a similarity for me there with Dirthamin was the god of knowledge, secrets and knowledge, and that for me strikes a very strong chord with Odin, because Odin is the god of knowledge and wisdom. He's also king of the gods, which is where he differs from Dirthamin in that. I see quite a few similarities, but also quite a few differences, and that's where I think they probably drew from other pantheons. and other belief systems. Somebody who knows those belief systems better would probably have a better hand or a better, like, a different angle to look at it from, and maybe be able to pick up on things that I'm not picking up on because I don't know them as well. But generally, the way they were with each other, the way the gods treated each other, and more specifically, the most specific thing that I can actually think of is the way that they passed their stories on. And I know that this was something which happened among many of the pantheons, many of the belief systems that are considered pagan. The Celts were good with oral stories, but the Vikings more so, the Norse pagans more so, because they didn't have a lot of, a lot of them would have been illiterate. There wasn't much of a written language back then anyway, other than runic, and it was mainly only priests and stuff like that. Like a lot of languages back then, it was mainly only the people who were part of, like, the religious hierarchy, or who were rich and had a lot of money, who knew how to read or write back then. So I can see a similarity there, in that a lot of what we know now of the sagas of the Vikings, I'm using Vikings as a catch-all for Norse pagans, but I mean, it's not quite the same thing, but you get my drift. A lot of the stories weren't actually written down until a lot later. But with the Romans and stuff like that, a lot of this stuff was written down and kept by them, and has been found throughout many of the years since. So we know that they had more. Not necessarily all of their stories were written down, but more of them were. That's touched on in quite a few different things as well. Also, I did mention the transients. I don't know why I was about to say that again. All the movement. Anyway, is there anything else we can cover on that? The pantheon itself is quite well mixed. Lots of gods, but also a lot of goddesses as well. What have we got? My brain is not working.
Wait, you mean the Norse pantheon or the
Elven pantheon? I mean, there aren't an awful lot of gods in general in the Elven pantheon, but at least it seems to be an even mix. With the Norse pantheon,
yeah, I would agree with that.
Relatively even. Silas, Missal, Gillinan, and Andril are all female. Dursamin, Elgarlan, Fallandin, Fenharil, and June are all male, so that's like a 45.
That's actually pretty good.
That's what I'm saying. Pretty well. It's a pretty good split. So, the Norse pantheon is much more vast than that. Much more vast than that. That I will say. I mean, I think it is one of the most expansive polytheistic religions.
Well, that might have just been a matter of they didn't have, like, the time to write, like, a bunch of gods, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about in general.
Yeah, I know.
Even in real life, the Norse had a lot of gods.
No, I'm just saying that's why the Elven pantheon only has, like 7, so.
Yeah. I mean, I've only mentioned, with the exception of mentioning Frigg, who was actually originally a member of the Vanir, which is the lower tier of gods in the Norse pantheon, because there are technically 2 tiers you get the upper tier, the Aesir, and the lower tier, the Vanir. So, which you don't really... I suppose there's a parallel that could be sort of thought up between... When you think about the Elven Pantheon and the other ones, the Norse Pantheon had the same sort of issue with the ice giants, frost giants. They were at war with the frost giants for a long time. So there's that comparison as well, which I hadn't actually thought of until now, because I'd completely forgotten that there were the elven gods that we know about, and the ones we don't talk about. The ones nobody talks about. The ones that nobody knows the names of. So, I had forgotten about that. Because it's between those two groups that Finharil sort of gently sort of does his little... What's the word I'm looking for here? I'm sick of saying what's the word I'm looking for. Tightrope walk. It's that fine line that Finharil tightropes down, you know? Tiptoes down, being sort of like a bit on both sides. And Loki is quite the same, because he's not actually a god. He's actually a child of a frost giant. So, aye. What I will say is that they love their hunting, elves, and it is something which is very important to them. It's something which they intend to sort of try and keep close to them, to the point where actually like bows are a great point of pride.
No, I feel like the Qun and the Qunari has really been up for debate as to what sort of religion it draws influence from. There's a lot of, like, there's been people talking about how it's a communist belief. There's been talk of, like, what?
I was going to say there have been comparisons between the Qun and Islam.
Yeah.
Which I don't think are at all accurate.
No, I don't. I think that's very inaccurate. I can see it with, like, their art and architecture.
Yeah. But, I mean, their makeup and belief systems are completely different.
And it also feels rude to say that. Because the Qun feels a little oppressive to me, and it's not. That's, I think, an awful comparison to make. Actually, I can definitely see it in the art and architecture for sure. But that's where the line is drawn, just art and architecture. And even with Confucianism, I would say Confucianism might have some stuff that's a little more similar. But I searched this trying to figure out what exactly is there. Now, it might be like, Elven, where it just takes a little here, a little there, a little that, but I found a Tumblr post that seems to really break down to a belief system that is very similar to the Qun, and I'm sold on it. This is from a diecast Tumblr post, and it sort of goes through the details about why it's not like Confucianism, because they're really into family, and Qunari don't have families. They're not Islam. I mean, they have art and architecture and a sacred book, but that's where it ends. And it's not communist. And then it goes on down on the bottom to talk about Plato's Republic, which I had never heard of until I read this. I mean, I know who Plato is, but and it talks about how Plato had a low opinion of humanity and felt the ideal system of government would be a meritocratic autocracy where everybody was assigned a role in the larger society. And the whole sort of hierarchy and class system, I feel like, actually, we might have talked about this in English class in high school when we were reading Brave New World. Because when I was reading about their system, and learning about the way the Qun has, like, different roles for people, and, like, if you have this, you're assigned stuff and everything, and the fact that they don't really have families, that reminded me of books like The Giver and Brave New World.
Right.
So, I don't know, I guess I don't have much to say on that, except that I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about this. I had never heard of this before I found this article. But judging by what this says, and what I researched Plato's Republic to be, it seems fitting.
Going just by the description written here, it sounds exactly the same, with one exception. It says here, I've got the page in front of me right now, it says here at the bottom, there really is only one major difference, besides the basic fantasy stuff, and that's that the Republic is supposed to be ruled by an individual philosopher king, meaning essentially the smartest person in the country is running the country. The Qun doesn't seem to have anything that seems that similar. Because, as it says, each of the three branches of government are ruled by their own executive, and they're kind of chill. So they're not about to start fighting with each other or disagreeing with each other or going, I should be the big kahuna.
And I think that's where the whole idea about them being based on a communist society has come from, is that they don't have a leader. They're just, well, I don't even want to say that, because there are communist societies that do have a leader. It just, they all seem to sort of work together to govern themselves, which I will admit, while I don't abide by what the Qun says, I don't agree with the whole, you just are this role, and you are who you are, and that's the rule that, like, what if you want to do something else? Well, you can't, you know. I think there are definitely oppressive parts of the Qun. There are other things that I almost feel like if you take a little bit from the Kunari, you take a little bit from the elven beliefs, you take a little bit from the dwarves, you take a little bit, you know, from, like, all of these, then you have a good, like, they all have their bad and good parts, which I guess is true about religion in our lives, too, in our world. So, I guess I don't have much more to say on the Kunari, except for that. Because in general, there doesn't seem to be much more than what we discussed in, like, the Codex or in the lore or anything.
No, that's true.
Unless you have something more to add.
No, I don't think I do. I will be honest with you, the Qun and the Stone, respectively, are two religions in the Dragon Age universe which I haven't actually looked as much into as I would have liked. I probably should have been more prepared for this episode, if I'm honest.
Well, the stone, they go into even less detail with the stone. It's literally
I had noticed.
a page.
It's a page. I mean, this isn't just to clarify, this is not a review of the World of Thedas Volume 1, but literally, when they're talking about the Qun and the Qunari, they go from talking about the Qun, culture, childhood, gender roles, Ben Hasras, Halbashoth, about the Sarabas, and then they're done. You know, once they've mentioned all of that, all of the pretty important stuff to know about the Qun and the Qunari, then they move on. But with this, with the stone, you get, like, they talk about the stone and the paragons. And that's it. Nothing else. So even if I had been more prepared, there isn't really much to look into directly in the book.
You know, that's
I will say that.
I wonder where does the stone come from? Like, I know that there are some religions out there, or system of beliefs that have a focus on worshipping ancestors. But that seems to be the bulk of it. Like, the paragons are the living ancestors who they, like, regard and stuff. It's almost like sort of sainthood in Catholicism, where someone does something so great or so wonderful for their beliefs or whatever. And I would say most of them, they're people that died for their beliefs. They get raised up to saint level. So I would equate paragons with saint. But
what I would say is I've just noticed something, actually, in that Tumblr post. There is a religion which does worship their ancestors. Confucians.
Yeah, Confucianism does, but I would say that going into the stone doesn't really have... I mean, I guess there's the whole... It doesn't really seem to go into detail enough for it to be like Confucianism.
No, obviously. That was the only parallel that I could draw there.
Yeah.
Because they don't seem to function much like a big family either. Especially not when you've got the casteless.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not... that wasn't like I was going out of my way to go like, oh, but maybe they could be like Confucians. No. It's just that I did spot that out of the corner of my eye while we were talking about that. What I will say is their obsession with the stone, I think, comes almost entirely from generations after generations after generations of dwarves just living down there.
Yeah, I wondered what exactly is the stone per se. Like, they talk about being stone's children. Like, I don't feel like I've seen, maybe it's somewhere and I just haven't done the proper research, but I feel like they don't really say what the stone is. Like,
the only thing that I can think of, the only thing that makes sense is that it's the stone that surrounds them everywhere they are, because they're underground in caves and stuff, and they will be surrounded by a lot of stone. That's the only thing that I can imagine. I mean, if you go into Orzammar, or Orgrimmar, which one? One's from World of Warcraft, one's from Dragon Age, and my brain keeps...
Yeah, it's Orzammar, don't worry. It's Orzammar.
You go into Orzammar.
Direct from Orzammar, don't you remember?
Yes, I did. That's the thing! Orgrimmar would be so disappointed in me right now. I apologise, my adorable little dwarf, even. Brain!
Are you okay?
What the words? No, I am not. I don't know what's wrong with me, but no, I'm not okay.
I mean, I'm okay with talking about adorable little elves if you want to get into
that.
Yeah,
okay, we're not going to get on to Fenris again, thank you. Let's just leave that there right now before we end up sending everybody on a mild rampage, because Rose is off on one again.
Welcome to our 100-hour podcast. No.
Oh, one day probably.
I hope you got snacks.
Yeah, and diapers. Don't move from that seat or else. But yes, it says here they forged their home from her, so it's got to be the stone that surrounds them, that they make, that they build their homes from, the caves that they live in. It has to be that. That's got to be what they're talking about.
So they think the stone that surrounds them has a living entity?
Either that or they're like proper trippy hippie hippies who think that, like, understandably so, the Earth gives us life.
Okay.
Think about everything that the Earth gives us, right?
Put into that context, it makes more sense.
Yes.
That
it could be
the
something
Earth is living, essentially. The stone is living. Okay.
It could genuinely just be something as simple as that.
Okay, so I was thinking harder about it than I needed to. I mean, I would say that the art and architecture seems very Norse, but...
It does.
That's it.
That I will say. That is, yeah, I had noticed that myself. Especially going around in the...
Although I think that's just a general dwarven thing, because if you look at dwarves and, like, other fantasy stories, they all seem to have
They're all either... and you'll notice they're either, like, sort of Norse or Scottish or something like that. Most dwarves that you get in fantasy settings these days are Scottish. And I don't know why. We're not all that short, okay? I know we're a historically short people, but we're not all that short. I mean, my auntie is, but I'm not.
Yeah, you're probably taller than me. And I'm mostly German.
Yeah. I'm mostly Viking and elf. So.
It also seems to be, like, almost an atheist religion, too, in a sense, because they don't really have a god. They have their ancestors that they worship and the paragons, but there's, like, not, like, a god that, like, you know, sort of created all this or whatever, you know?
Yeah. And there's no, like, I mean, there are rules just like with everything else, but, you know, it seems a lot less forced. Although when I say that, actually, I have to contradict myself immediately afterwards, because when you look at their setup of marriage, which seems to come directly from that whole setup, it's not great. And when you can take the caste list into consideration, also not great. You know, they've got an entire sub-level in a lot of places where they keep, like, dwarves who don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fucking horrible. I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's genuinely one of the only things. That and the sort of marriage setup, how that works among the dwarves. Those are the only two things I hate about them. The fact that the caste lists even exist.
Well, isn't there, like, if you play as a male warden, you can encounter, is it a cat? I might be wrong. I haven't played this. I just know about it. So I might be completely wrong. But I feel like it's a casteless dwarf woman who just wants to have your child, because if she has a child who is a warden, they will, like, the child won't be casteless or something.
Oh, right. No, I've played this. There is I do believe I know which mission you're talking about. There's a casteless woman. She's been made casteless by her family because she had a baby with someone.
No, this is different. I'm not talking about Zerlinda.
That I've never even heard of.
No, I'm not talking about Zerlinda. I'm talking about
because that one I have never heard in my life.
Yeah, okay. Her name is Marty. Go away, Ad. It says she is okay. She is encountered during the dwarf noble origin, and according to herself, she is a quite experienced noble hunter. She, along with her fellow... Okay, that's not important. As her goal as a noble hunter is to bear the son of a noble caste man in order to raise her status in Ozamar, a male dwarf noble who talks to her has the opportunity to bed Marty, or both of them. So she is with... So, if you play as a dwarf noble male,
right,
you can sleep with her, and it's in order for her son to not, like... Okay, I don't think it's in order to, but it, like... No, it is. It's to bear... Her goal is to bear the son of a noble caste man in order to raise her status in Orzammar. Mm-hmm. So, it's all to raise her status. Like, there is no love, like, no, like, passion in it or anything. It's literally just a means to an end.
Aye.
Which makes it... Which is really, really sad.
Again, the entire marriage system of the stone is set up the same way. When you think about how they have to marry, wait until I look it up, because it's something that's vexed me for a long time. But if I tried to just off the cuff explain it now, I wouldn't be able to, so give me a second till I look this up.
Ah, this is interesting. Marty's son possibly has a half-brother in Kieran if the wording completes the dark ritual of Morrigan.
What I'm going to read right now comes directly from the Dragon Age fandom wiki, right? Mm-hmm. Which I actually think fandom wikis are a great source of information.
Oh, they're great. I basically use it for everything.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. I've got the app on my phone, but it wasn't working the other day when I was trying to look stuff up. Yeah, so this is taken directly from that. The dwarves of Orzammar are noted for their polyamory, which is the keeping of multiple intimate partners. I know you will have known that because it's been spoken about before. Anyway, especially among the upper classes. While a dwarf has only one legal spouse, many nobles keep concubines, typically noble hunters who are raised up to be part of the household and have their names recorded in the memories. A dwarf's caste is determined by that of their same-sex parent. So many casteless offer themselves to nobles or to other high-caste dwarves as sexual partners in the hopes of producing a child of the noble's gender. Because once you've done that, of course, the parent of that child, the casteless parent, is no longer casteless. As dwarven fertility is in dangerous decline due to chronic exposure to darkspawn corruption, as well as because of constant war with them, any noble child is considered a blessing, and such offers are rarely turned down. Which explains why it happens so often.
I don't know if that pertains to their religion, though. It just seems to be something that... That's the thing, it's not like the others where the religion seems to inform, like, their way of life so much. It just seems to be, okay, we're gonna worship the ancestors and the paragons, and that's it. Like...
Yeah, I can't see what bugged me so much about it. But, I mean, essentially, the society of Orzammar specifically seems to place a lot of pressure on members of each caste to marry within their caste. Because otherwise, you know, they're either reaching too high or they're, like, going below themselves. They don't marry for love. It's status. It's a status thing.
Which, I mean, you could argue until, I would say, probably until, you know, the 1800s. It wasn't, marrying for love was not really a thing that was common. It was arranged, it was for status, it was a contract agreement, like, you know.
It was a business deal, more often than not.
Yeah, it was a business deal. Which is very much, you know, seems to be the situation here, where they're looking for someone to raise their status. It's not about affection or anything like that, you know.
Mm-hmm. All in all, it certainly seems like throughout all of the religions in Thedas, there are quite a lot of comparisons to be made to most world religions in some way or another, or at least most of the bigger ones, like the bigger, older ones in relation to, like, the elves, and the sort of the still yet some of the bigger ones, the huge religions for the likes of Andrastian faith. There are definitely plenty of comparisons to be made between many things. To be honest, we could actually sit here for a lot longer, I would imagine, but that's that's definitely for another day.
Oh, I could definitely go on more about Andrastian, because there's stuff we didn't even cover, like, Tevinter being so different from the rest of Andrastianism.
Their gender roles are entirely flipped.
They are. And in some ways, I would almost say, like, because I think it's been said before that Tevinter is sort of like America.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we're much more aggressive about Christianity than other places.
Oh, yeah.
And I see that in Tevinter.
Yeah.
And a very, very skewed version of Andrastianism versus a very skewed version of Christianity here, so.
And a very misogynistic seeming type in Tevinter.
In general, or maybe I think Tevinter's just supposed to be like a culty, version of it.
That seems pretty accurate, yeah.
Everything that I would have to say about Tevinter would basically be boiled down to that, is that it's a skewed version of Christianity resulting in something like a cult, so.
Yeah, that sounds a bit right.
I would like to know a little more about the Cune and a lot more about the stone, if I'm being honest. That would be really nice.
Yeah, it would be really nice to know more about the stone, definitely. I mean, I think you can get the general gist about the Cune from what's written in the book and the codexes, but there aren't many codexes other than about specific paragons when it comes to the stone. So it would be nice to learn more about all of them. I'm desperate to know more about the elven pantheon, the elven religion. I want to know about the Forgotten Ones. The whole thing. Like, just give me more Dragon Age in general, really. Give me my game, Bioware!
I was say that it boils down to give me my game.
It does.
Well, I think considering the premise of Dragon Age 4, we actually may know more about the Elven Pantheon.
Yes, so. I'm hoping so. I am rubbing my hands together in anticipation of that. I nearly said participation. My mouth is really just not functioning correctly tonight at all.
You just secretly want to participate in the making of Dragon Age. That's
I do. Right there. I do. I would kill to be a voice actor on those games. Are you kidding me? I want to voice act in Dragon Age. I'd be good. Alright? I would be good at it. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything that we can right now. Anyway.
I think I'm sure there's more, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Dragon Age.
We covered the bulk of it.
Yeah, but you know us, we could literally sit here and pick it apart for hours on hours and hours.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have to work tomorrow, so I could just sit here and pick it apart.
Yeah.
But alas.
Yes. Alas, adulting.
Yeah. It's overrated. Don't do it.
Oh, I know. I'm aware. I did it once, but not for long. And with that, I do believe we are at question of the week time.
Okay. All right.
And I have thought one up for this week.
Okay.
Okay. Question of the week. Which of the Thedosian religions do you most closely associate yourself with?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Ooh. I'm getting good at this question stuff. So, yeah, if you want to tell us that, feel free to go ahead. If you're watching on YouTube, write it in the comments down below.
You can also write it in our review if you're listening on a podcast service.
Yeah, or you can feel free to tweet it at us. Yes, we have Twitter now. The links for all of those will be in the descriptions, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. If you stayed to the end, you're a legend. If you've enjoyed yourselves, make sure to smack that like button with a quick stone fist, and if you didn't, well then, may the Dread Wolf take you.
We do hope you'll join us again, and if you want to make sure you can, please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to make sure you never miss our uploads. We hope you have a fantastic week ahead, and with all the blessings of Andraste and the Maker.
And the light of Elgarnan and Mithal to guide your way, may Siles keep your Aravel warm and full.
We'll see you next time we journey to the left of the Fade. Goodbye.
Goodbye.